What's going on, my people? Happy Software Sundays. The show is hosted by Build, Learn, Impact, where our mission is really to inform, educate, and start discussions around technology and the types of transformations it drives inside of the world and the economy. I'm your host, KD, and I have almost a decade of experience building software solutions and using technology in my daily life. Well, of course, anyone probably has, uh, but also operating as a software developer and technology consultant at some of the world's largest companies, working in fintech, uh, working with some retail customers and healthcare customers, just driving and building their software, their systems, and the things that they are working on. Uh, I am going to share some of the announcements we have for this month. So, first, shout out the Capricorns of the month. Uh, Happy birthday to my little cousin, Baby L. His birthday passed a few days ago. And Auntie Mika, happy birthday to you. Hope you feeling amazing. Uh, Ra, happy birthday to you. Little cousin Jaden, happy birthday to you as well. Basically, happy birthday to all my Capricorns. I hope y'all feeling good, feeling great. Wish y'all the best for this year and every year moving forward. I'm wishing y'all health and peace and happiness, everything. Uh, and also wanted to just speak on MLK Day is tomorrow. I was talking to my wife about what that really represents, and I want to emphasize and highlight what her thoughts are there. Uh, Pretty much the fact that MLK was still advocating for peace amongst different groups and populations, even though relationships up to that point and even afterwards were still challenged. So something to keep in mind as we're taking this holiday. Some of us have it, some of us don't, but even just acknowledging of MLK and the type of work that he's done. So keep that in your thoughts for this week and every day moving forward, really. So with that being said, let's get started. There's a few interesting things I wanted to discuss today, as well as just answering those questions from our community to help everyone improve. So first things first, I'm gonna discuss the fact that Apple is teaming up with Google to begin improving Siri. In the past or in the last year, they started their AI journey, really focusing on the fact that there was a privacy concern. They wanted to ensure reliability of their applications and Siri and all of their features, right? Uh, as a company, Apple is not just a front of line. They weren't just developing things and trying to get them to market. They really spend a lot of time getting things perfect for how they share and bring into the world. Um, this deal originally started with OpenAI, and that's who their original partners were when they began to integrate ChatGPT with Siri. Uh, that relationship is what Apple Intelligence relied on so far, but now we're starting to see them start larger conversations with bigger budgets with some of their older partners. Uh, Google and Apple have long had strong relationships. Uh, Google currently pays Apple at least $1 billion to be their default search engine. That uh, practice and that relationship had a little bit of scrutiny that it faced last year about antitrust and anti-competitive practices, or whether or not it was an anti-competitive practice. Um, they've made it out of that conversation, and now that partnership is growing even more now. like I said, another $1 billion is going to be paid to make Siri smarter, but not with ChatGPT. Now it's going to be driven primarily by Gemini. And it's very interesting that Gemini has already been making waves inside of the market. If you think back to even 18 months ago, when Bard first came out and people were, first getting their hands on that initial product from Google, there was a lot of uh, discontent with how it worked. It wasn't giving the same uh, delightfulness that you would have expected of ChatGPT at the time. And it's really not so far and long back, but now they've come a very long way with their model and how they're deploying it into their products. So, as a tool and as a company, they're doing way better with the intelligence layer from Gemini inside of their Google Suite. So you can have it with your Gmail, your Docs, even your PowerPoints, having that AI copilot with you. Uh, to even their now, they've pretty much rolled it out everywhere, I think, so far. But the AI summaries at the top of the search and having that as a way to interact with their Gemini model. And even Nano Banana, where you can create some really realistic uh, photos and images and videos. So they've come very far from where they started in terms of AI and how they were positioning themselves. But now they've been able to secure another partner into their development and their journey. Apple also benefits from the fact that they can have a little bit more model stability, I think, and reliability. Now, instead of focusing only on ChatGPT, they have the ability to say, hey, if we want to do something with ChatGPT, OpenAI, or Google Gemini, then we have that option. So it doesn't lock them into any specific standards or rules that they may not want to be locked into, especially considering the fact that they're not building their own and that they don't have that fine grained custom control that they may usually opt for. Um, it's very interesting to me that Gemini as a product and even Google in the AI market, it's they've taken way more market share and they've grown their users much more strongly than OpenAI has. Uh, so they're basically eating their lunch, and I'm wondering how long that'll last and if ChatGPT and OpenAI will be able to compete, especially when they lose a significant foothold inside of one of their or could have been largest partners. Another story to talk about is the fact that Meta has recently, at this point, laid off another 1,500 roles inside of their organization, primarily from Reality Labs, which was their VR, AR segment of their business. Uh, as you know, they went heavy into the metaverse a few years ago. um, that was one of like the major concerns that people had with Meta and their continued growth was how much money they were putting inside of the metaverse and building that up. When they finally decided to pause those investments, there was a little challenges inside of their organization at the time with those roles and those teams that they were investing so heavily into. But they eventually ended up shifting into AI. And that started with them integrating their uh, Instagram product and their Facebook product, having AI with that, or even improving their Facebook ads to have more AI ready and AI native features. And they're even open sourcing Llama and developing that open source large language model. So they have shifted very heavily from where they once were into into AI and what that can do. Uh, I think this pivot or this reiterating of the pivot is also going to be driven by the fact that they're finding ways to integrate AI into some of the products that they already have. They have not the full, like they have Oculus uh, under their umbrella, but they are not focusing on making the AR VR experience uh, more robust. They're focusing on now how do I integrate AI into the already existing AR products and that we already have, or these in other products, Instagram and Facebook ads. It's a step into we don't need to build more. We need to figure out how do we use what we already have in place to do more, and that's going to be very exciting for them and their team because as a platform, there's a lot you can do with IoT, and that's all these uh, AR VR glasses are. When you look at the Meta Ray-Bans, it's just a device that brings the internet and the development that you could do closer to the user. Um, and AI as a platform shift. You can put AI anywhere, and so once you have it that close to you in a different type of interface, what does that unlock for the economy and consumers and everything that we can just build and do as a society? So I'm very excited about what they can do with what they already have, and it makes a lot of sense that they're not trying to invest so much more into AR because they in AR and VR specifically, because they're already planning to make a substantial investment inside of AI from the data center perspective, and they've already been investing, but they're going to be investing even more in the next few years. So it's like they're probably already challenged on their budget to make the current team work and to make the current development of the product keep up with the speed of change and the things that are happening. So this reallocation of the budget is going to be really helpful to help give them more of a run before they have to make the product profitable. However, the capital expenditure and operating expenses begins to look. But another thing to keep in mind as a developer and anyone working inside of the field is that the landscape is changing. The skill gap, you know, from people that don't use AI to who do use AI, that's growing. But also the fact that the platforms that we're building for are also changing very quickly beneath us. There was a time where mobile was the priority, and that's where all of the skills were. But now, at some point, it was blockchain, and at some point, it was AR, VR, and it'll probably go back to that at some point again. But today, the real focus is on AI and how can we use AI to drive the business forward. And more along the lines of the investment that has been going into AI is the fact that Moody's has predicted that there will be almost $3 trillion spent to drive the next data center build out. 3 trillion is almost as much as the most valuable companies in the world. And that's crazy. If you think about in 4 years, they want to spend $3 trillion. And I'm saying that's probably a collection of not just the metas of the world, but also AWS, Google, Nvidia. Like they all are going to be spending that money for the build out. So, wow, first of all. But there's an opportunity that is going to be presented for everyone working in and around where these build outs are happening. Uh, First, just thinking about the fact that the infrastructure you need for a data center is going to be networks. So you need to have the network providers set up. They're going to be hiring for a lot of positions, from construction also to people that understand how to lay these networks and these different lines. We're talking about power, power generation, power distribution. Those types of opportunities are going to be very plentiful, and at some point, we're going to have all of these data centers, which are going to need data center engineers. They're going to need network engineers. They're going to need cloud engineers who are building on top of these data centers, because that was the whole point. We're not building these data centers just to have really large, hot, and power hungry machines. We want to run very power hungry and a lot of different software on top of them. That's going to be where AI is going to run in the future. Um, and so there's going to be a need for that over the long term. So that's the way I was thinking about it. Is anyone in school right now, I would still focus on learning the AI, learning about software development, learning about cloud and all of these software applications that run on this hardware that we're building for, because those are going to be that's going to be when we start looking for the return on investment in the next 4 years, 5 years. But anyone who can shift very quickly inside of your career or your trade to get into how do I help build the physical infrastructure of AI, that's going to be key if you're just trying to jump into the market right now, or you're switching between careers or industries. Um, Another thing to think about is the fact that this technology is driving the next wave of growth across the economy in the US and across the globe. Everyone is trying to figure out how do we build more for AI, because we understand how much AI is going to change the world. Right now, we're only at the very early stages. It's going to be very interesting what happens next when we have all of these data centers online, because at that point you'll be able to train smarter models faster, potentially. You'll be able to run more uh, large models, and maybe that will give us the AGI, that godlike AI that people are expecting to be built. They're going to need and live on this infrastructure that's being built. So it's going to be very interesting what happens when it really arrives. But that's changing of course, the labor market. It's also changing the real estate market and just the economy as a whole. Like, business is going to be running on AI. What does that look like? What does that look like for retail, media? That's things that you have to keep in mind when we start seeing these types of investments, because what look what's changed so far, and we haven't spent that much. But with that being said, uh, that's all I have for news that I wanted to discuss. I will put the information into the description or somewhere, linked it somewhere around. But check that out, uh, and keep it all in mind. But we're gonna move on into the Q&A section. This part of the episode is really to make sure that we are thinking about the questions and the ideas that will prepare us for not only interviews, but how we think about growing as a developer inside of our roles, but also understanding when you do transition to being more independent, how do you lead your solo team, and how do you make decisions that are best for your future development as maybe a startup founder. also. So I like to share that, I would say, angle with you. Oh, also, like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTube stuff, uh, and let me know what is not clear, what would you like to learn about, and what else we could add to improve the experience and the information being given.
What is the difference between an operational database and an analytical database?
The main difference between the two is the scale of the data that's being stored. In an operational database, we're using this data in real time. That could be for payments or transactions. That could be just for providing user identity services. You're going to be using that database very quickly, and it's going to need to support a lot of users at the same time. That changes the way and the types of systems that we can use, because an operational database is not going to be something that you can just turn off at any time, and it can't be paused or blocked at any time, right? So that changes our underlying need for it. Analytical databases are built to support reporting for the business. They can provide uh, historical data that can be used to identify trends across the business, but you're not going to use them heavily to make a decision at a specific time or to serve your customer. That type of analytical database can support and be okay if you turn it off for a moment or if there is some type of downtime, versus our operational databases, which cannot. Uh, you can also store much more data inside of a analytical database, because we're not so worried about, again, the time that it'll take for maybe a query to go through. Think about it as an operational database is necessary to drive the business and the services and products that that business is uh, providing to the market. But your analytical database is going to be useful for everyone internally to understand where are we at as an organization and how we can improve into the future. Mature companies are going to have some version of both inside of their systems and in their architecture. Your operational database is going to be copied every day to your analytical database. So you can have that, uh, not just a snapshot, but also just making sure that you have some way to understand where were we 3 months ago, and that would be very important too. Uh, but something else to keep in mind is the fact that the people who are using operational databases are not going to be the same people that are using the analytical databases, and they're not, because again, they're not meant to serve the same people. If I'm working primarily inside of a operational database, I'm probably a developer or a QA tester, making sure that the system is not producing any type of errors and that the performance is in line with what we expect from a latency standpoint. So my objective when looking at this technology or this tool is going to be different than someone who is trying to understand, what does this information that I'm looking at tell me about this part of my business. So from a familiarity standpoint, your operational database is going to be more technical. It's going to be closer to the code and the nitty gritty of what is happening with the business logic. Uh, the analytical database, on the other hand, is going to be less technical. You may have some type of GUI attached, because they don't really care about the cleanliness of the code. They just want to make sure that they see high level aggregates of that data that they're looking at. And so, again, that experience is going to be a lot different to keep in mind.
When does it make sense to move from a monolith application to a microservices architecture?
Monolith applications are going to be the primary uh, components that you work with until you find some need to move to a microservices architecture. If you're just starting on your product, or if you're just starting with this particular application and the business objective is not quite clear, we're not sure of the product in the market that we're trying to match, you're going to just start building everything into your platform uh, and making it solve the problems as they come up. That's going to be fine when you have a smaller team, when there are less moving parts going on. But we move to microservices when the cost of change is becoming more difficult, when it requires us to have some very large conversations and we could potentially block and break other parts of the organization or our team when we want to make a change to the identity provider without uh, breaking any of the functionality we're providing to the users. That's when you want to shift more to a microservices architecture because it's going to allow you to, again, going back to the modular development of software, you can add something and pull something else out without causing significant harm to the rest of the system as a whole. But there are some challenges when we start looking into microservices architectures. With a microservices, well, with a microservice and multiple, you're going to have to deal with some distributed system problems now. You're going to have to understand the latency between not just these uh, functions running inside of our single running piece of code. Now you need to understand the fact that there's a network difference between them. So there's going to be some latency there and some bandwidth constraints. We may not be able to send as much data as we could the same way and as easily between these two different services. When you understand that you have to shift from a monolith to a microservice, you're understanding now that all of the problems that come with building one piece of software are going to multiply because now you're going to have those same problems in terms of versioning. If you had to bump a SSL version for one application or for one monolith at a certain point and it took you 2 weeks, if you have two microservices running now, it might take you maybe 3 weeks to make both of those changes. If you have two separate teams running in parallel or multiple developers running in parallel where that work can get done without uh, spending so much time on it uh, and blocking you, then that may not be a problem. But if you don't have the resources and support to handle those different work streams in place, then it doesn't help you to shift to a microservice architecture. You're probably going to end up shooting yourself in the foot because now you have to deal with problems that uh, are, again, multiplied. You don't have the support that you need. That being said, microservices are going to require you to have more discipline and maturity from a team perspective, but also from a infrastructure and platform perspective. If you want to have microservices, you need to make sure your CI/CD pipelines are reliable, and the you want to make sure that there are processes in place to handle changes very quickly because you may have to make those changes, and you don't want to have something breaking that could, disable a significant part of the application.
Why are variables important in programming?
Variables are important to understand inside of programming because they allow you to have different inputs go through your application without requiring you to hard code them. If you had to handle raw data and that data had to be hard coded into your application. So if I wanted to send a message to Bianca, or I wanted to send a message to Emily, then I would need to type both of their names every time. If I want to send a message to this person, then that variable is dynamic enough that no matter what person that I give it, it'll always work the same. That's why we add variables into our code. They're a solution for dealing with a world that is constantly changing. If we didn't have variables to help represent the type of data that we were putting into our code, then we would not be able to move as quickly as we do with real world concepts that we end up bringing and digitizing with our systems. When you use a variable, it's going to more clearly indicate the intent and the uh, understanding of what is being modeled to future developers or yourself when you go back and read that code versus having to deal with why am I using this number or this string of characters uh, at this time, and if you did not have a variable in place. Having a variable makes it. Well, I was actually just thinking about the fact that when you're describing a variable in certain languages, you are describing a number. That number could represent something, or you're describing a string or a date. These types, or you can even have more complex data objects that you're representing uh, that could have different keys and values. But putting that information all into a variable allows you to just make a mental model of what's happening more clearly.
What are the best ways for a beginner to start learning how to code?
In 2026, it's much easier for anyone to learn how to code. It's much easier for anyone to find and get the code that they need to build anything. You can build a website, you can build an app, you can build an automation with code that is generated by a ChatGPT or a Gemini. The real challenge will be reading that code and understanding the code that you find, whether it be from AI or from any other place you may get it from on the internet. When I say that it's important for everyone to learn how to code, it's more me pointing at a fundamental concept that everyone is going to have to deal with in this world, and whether they're aware of it or not. Today, every student needs to learn about numbers. They need to know what a number is, they need to know what addition is. Every student needs to learn how to read. They need to understand the syntax and the grammar of the languages that are being spoken around them. A lot of this happens naturally from just interacting with people and using numbers and words and uh, written or verbal words in practice in the real world. A lot of us don't get the understanding of code and conditional logic and the syntax that uh, controls the digital world, even though we are very connected to these digital systems. Learning the code is like learning to speak to any other thing in this world at this point. If you're going to be talking to AI systems, it would be helpful for you to understand the logic that these AI systems are using to actually operate. And that AI could be a actual agent or some type of chat based uh, product, or it could be your browser that is running some type of automated process for you. Understanding how to code and understanding that logic that is being shifted between yourself and the device is going to be very important for you and just understanding how your world works. If you want to learn how to code, start with the basics, learn the code, um, pick a language. That language I would recommend to be something like Python or even Golang. Python and JavaScript are much closer to regular language, so you can get away with having a more high level understanding of the code and what's happening. Versus when you use a language like Go or C++, you'll have the benefit of understanding the underlying hardware that is being used inside of a computer. That's sometimes good to play around with and be aware of. Um, but there are plenty of options to choose from depending on the interest that you have and what you want to build. Find some tutorials. You can go to Free Code Camp, Code Academy, and some other like W3 schools. You can find tutorials that will teach you how to code. Look into those tutorials and don't focus so much on just watching and listening to what they're showing you or what they're telling you about this particular language that you're using. Spend some time actually playing around and trying the code that they're giving and running some of the functions that they're sharing with you. You want to build the habit and the practice of coding and reading code and understanding what this code does and change some things. See if you can break the code. See if and understand why you broke the code. And see if you can change a value from one character to another character or some one number to another number and really get familiar with making those changes because that's what you do as a developer. You're just going through the same exercises. You're changing a variable here, you're updating some logic, and you're just doing that until you get your problem solved or you get the output that you expected. And connect with people from the industry. You want to sharpen your skills by sharpening it against other people that are using those same skills. You want to immerse yourself into the readings and the conversations and the technologies and resources that the people inside of your industry are also following. That will help improve your thought process inside of technology and make it make sense to you from a different perspective and not just from the code. But definitely learn to code. There's no reason not to be coding or understand how code works in 2026. Information is plentiful. Um, and if you want to find a community that talks about technology and has those discussions, whether you are an aspiring developer or just someone that wants to build your own app, definitely come into Build, Learn, Impact. We are, having those conversations and making those spaces for everyone that's interested.
What does it mean to encrypt data?
So I'll start with highlighting what data is. Data could be anything, right? Data could be your personal identifiable information. That could be your social security number or your name or your address. Data could be your payment transactions. Maybe we know how much you spend on Netflix every month or Chipotle or whatever that uh, thing is that you spend your budget on. Or data could be the names of the people that you spend your time with, your friends, your family, your coworkers. Data is valuable. It could be valuable to a foreign nation state, or it could be valuable to your crazy ex girlfriend. But and even someone in between. But data is going to be one of those uh, assets that you can own and that you can give away and that has a value. And that's why we encrypt it. We encrypt it in transit and at rest, meaning we are encrypting the data when we're not doing anything with it. Oh, and we're encrypting it when we're sharing it with other people, and that's nothing new. If you go back far enough, you will see substitution ciphers like the Caesar cipher being used to uh, make and send secret messages. That's the same thing we're doing with data encryption today, except the ciphers and or the function that you're using to encrypt that data has just become more sophisticated. Instead of being a secret that does it, now we're using math to encrypt that same information and that same data. Uh, if you look at the history, a lot of the initial internet usage was done with no security in mind. All data was going through and being passed in plain text. But that level of security would not empower us and allow us to do all the things that we do today on the internet. We make transactions. You can buy a house, a car, or anything on the internet. We have our government services and our voting process. A lot of that is being done through digital tools today. Uh, Having a way to encrypt it and making sure it's encrypted wherever it's being used is one of the only reasons we can do more with technology inside of society. And that's all we had today for the Q&A. If you have any questions that you would like me to go over, put them inside of the comments, and we can reach out to you or add them into the next show. But I do want to close out with some final thoughts on hard work and the fact that hard work is more difficult to do today because of all the ease and convenience that we have in life. A lot of us have gotten very used to things being easy around us. Easy from not having to cook your own food because you can go and do DoorDash, or not having to clean your house because you can pay someone to clean for you, and even not having to think about what this email is that I want to write, to having ChatGPT or AI write that message for you. When you run from the hard work, you don't give your body or your mind or your spirit the ability and the opportunity that it needs to grow. Hard work is something that we all need to keep in mind and all continue to do, uh, because it allows us to grow. We can't grow without doing that work. So even if it gets hard, even if things feel challenging, I recommend everyone to keep doing it, because that's how you grow. That's how you learn, and that's how you continue to improve yourself and the people around you. So keep doing them hard things, pause, and I will see y'all next week on Software Sundays. Peace out.